the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, whether partial or total, has impact on different sectors. And then within each sector, there are second and third order implications. Welcome to Resilience Reflections, a Flavor of Ambition mini-series looking at how the Middle East is building resilience through a period of significant disruption. I'm Rami Rafih. I'm a managing director and senior partner at BCG, where I lead the global advantage practice across Europe, the Middle East, South America, and Africa. My work sits at the intersection of geopolitics and business strategy. The Middle East is ambitious. There are real opportunities in logistics, in chemicals, in some part of manufacturing, data centers and AI, infrastructure, tourism, aviation, just to name a few sectors. Recent developments, however, have raised questions about the resilience of the systems supporting those ambitions. Supply chains, infrastructure redundancy, access to capital, talent flow, and many others. These systems were designed for an environment that is priced in less volatility than companies and governments face today. In this episode, we will explore what the Middle East conflict and disruption around the Strait of Hormuz mean for global business and how the effects are being felt across sectors central to the region's growth agenda. The conflict in the Middle East evolves along three main dimensions, and they are interrelated. The first is duration, the second is geographic scope, the third is sectorial scope. Let's start with duration. At the beginning, we thought it would take weeks. Now we're into the month. Geographic scopes, we first thought it was constrained to Iran, then it evolved to the GCC. But now we see many countries, especially in the emerging markets, being affected. And we've seen at least 11 countries asking the help of the IMF, International Monetary Fund. The sectorial scope, and this will be the focus of today, we thought it would focus mainly on energy, transport, and logistics, but we quickly understood that it expands to other sectors. Several sectors are already disrupted, and unfortunately, the list is growing. We have identified 6 sectors that are disrupted, 3 of them with high level of disruption being shipping, gas, and oil, and then 3 others, aviation, metals, and chemicals, with medium level of disruption. Some have outsized geographic impact, others less. Let's start with shipping. Starting with shipping, the Strait of Hormuz is one of the 6 global choke points, along with the Taiwan Strait, the Strait of Malacca, Suez Canal, Bab el-Mandab, and Panama Canal. It's very important for containers, dry bulks, tankers, and other shipping. It impacts mainly the GCC, with some very highly, more than 50% of their imports and exports are impacted, but also impacts part of Africa, Southeast Asia, and even Europe to a certain extent. There are also second-order impacts on the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, with insuring costs being higher and then insurers even not covering some of the path towards the Bab el-Mandab and potentially even the Suez Canal, which is making the routes even longer going through South Africa. So there is an addition cost and an addition time of shipping. Let's move to the second sector, oil. We currently have around 15 million barrels per day of supply loss. There are several levers activated by countries, strategic reserves that could release 1.5 to 2 million barrels per day. There's spare capacity in certain countries that could reach 1 million barrels per day. Incremental production that is very low impact, we estimate at around 150,000 barrels per day. And there are some inventories here and there around 1 million. So that could lead to around 10 million barrels per day of a gap. On top of that, there is a pipeline. There are 2 actually pipeline bypasses. The first one being in Saudi Arabia that has been invested for more than 40 years, linking the east to the west, that can bring 4 to 5 million barrels a day of additional supply. The other one being in the UAE from the west to the east of the UAE, and that could bring around a 1 to 1.5 additional million barrel per day. As a final result, 5 to 6 million barrels per day are still needed. And demand destruction will become unavoidable if the Strait of Hormuz is still closed or partially closed. And the hardest impact is in Asia, where there's a huge import dependence on the oil in the GCC. Governments are not waiting. They are implementing demand and supply side measures to manage the energy disruption effectively. Some, as we said, are releasing strategic oil reserves. Some are putting price cap on gasoline. Some are having controlled allocation of fuel. Some are having restrictions on cooking gas. Some are even changing the mix into more coal, and others are even exploring going back to nuclear energy, and that is happening in Europe. Whatever happens, history has told us that in a large oil shock, countries take drastic measure and really rethink their supply chain on the long term and rethink their energy mix for the long term. The third sector is aviation. Aviation is impacted in two dimensions. The first being the cost of jet fuels, and the second being the geographic position of the GCC, which is a global hub for aviation. Let's start with the first dimension, jet fuel costs. The Middle East is exporting 53% of jet fuel. And of that export, 74% is going to Europe. So Europe is heavily impacted by the jet fuels. Jet fuel is around 25 to 30% of the cost of a passenger flight. And it's 20 to 30% of a cargo flight. And that is putting dramatic pressure on the margins in the industry. And the margins were already quite tight. We were at less than 10% EBIT margin average for cargo, between 5 to 10% average EBIT margin for passengers. Let's move to the second dimension of aviation. The Middle East is a relevant hub for both the passenger and global cargo. 451 million passengers travel through the Middle East and through the 15 hubs in the Middle East. 1/3 of them are connecting passengers. 20% of global cargo goes through the Middle East. Qatar Airways, Emirates, hold around 8% of combined market share. So airspace closures cause disruption, but operations have partially resumed in most airports, if not all of them. Let's move to the fifth sector, metals. And let's deep dive into aluminum. The Middle East is a critical aluminum hub. It accounts for 22 to 23% of the global aluminum supply, excluding China, which is the biggest aluminum producer, but mainly for domestic use. 80% of Middle East countries' aluminum production is exported, with the EU, USA, Turkey, Japan accounting for approximately 60% of the total exports. The most critical constraint is not production capacity, but alumina inventory. Aluminum prices have risen 13% and recorded a 4-year high, and premiums for physical supply chain have increased in Europe, in the US, and in Asia. The sixth and last sector is chemicals. The Middle East commands a high share of global capacity or production in chemicals. Let's take a few examples. 17% LNG, 10 to 15% urea and ammonia, 30% sulfur, 11% phosphate rock. What does that mean? That has a huge implication on fertilizer and ultimately on the agri-food system. Global fertilizer capacity has been curtailed. Fertilizer prices have spiked. Global production is already impacted. And farmers are responding to the supply chain shocks. We see shifts away from nitrogen-intensive crops, from wheat to barley in Australia, for example, from corn to soybeans in the US. Now that we've seen the impact on the 6 sectors, we have asked ourselves, what could the day after look like? In the day after, businesses will seek to resume and scale up operations to the extent feasible. Our teams have explored a hypothetical fastest recovery timeline for key sectors to return to a new normal. What are our assumptions? Ceasefire or peace agreement takes hold. The Strait of Hormuz reopens to all vessels. reconstruction of damaged infrastructure begins, economic policy uncertainty diminishes globally. These are the four assumptions for us for the day after. The return to normal, whether old normal or new normal, depends on three categories of requirements, each with distinct timelines. Let's start with the first category, infrastructure. And let's take the example of LNG trains. LNG trains need 3 to 5 years to get repaired. They need 2 to 4 weeks to be inspected and 6 to 9 months to restart. This is just LNG trains. Other infrastructure like refineries, aluminum smelters, oil field, all need certain time to recover. The second category is transits and flow. Mining need to be cleared. That takes approximately 2 months. The Red Sea route needs confidence to be returned. That needs quite some time. Stranded vessels needs to be released. That takes several weeks. Shipping networks and schedule need to be rebuilt. That takes 6 to 8 weeks. Feedstock need to transit, and then even container and dry bulk need to go into transit, and these take months to arrive to the final destination. The third category is the market and enabling conditions, insurance and risk. We need to go back to pre-war risk premiums. Labor and capacity need some time to mobilize, and then capital and confidence would need time. What does that mean for every sector that we discussed? I'm going to discuss them from the slowest to the fastest recovery. Let's start with gas. The infrastructure damage and the inspection delays is creating a multi-year recovery tail. Oil, it is hit hard, but restorable. Sequential field restarts brings production back progressively. Chemicals. The initial capacity disruption and the initial depletion is subject to a steady recovery after the shock replenishment and refineries restart. Aluminum smelters need time to recover, and those that have been hit will take significantly longer. Shipping. The stranded vessels were clearly and quickly reopened. However, the choke point confidence and route normalization will lag. Aviation, we believe, will be the fastest operational recovery. Elevated fuel costs and yield pressure will persist. The day after will not restore necessarily the status quo. We see structural shifts that can reshape the new normal across energy, shipping, and security. Three main questions for the energy. How will countries ensure energy security, including strategic reserves, domestic production, and choke point diversification? Will this conflict accelerate the energy transition towards renewable and EV, or push countries towards coal and alternatives? How will GCC investment attractiveness shift across energy, infrastructure, and the broader economic development? On shipping, we see two questions. Has the conflict permanently repriced choke point dependent trade routes and structurally elevated maritime risk premiums? Will alternative routing become permanent, and will government assume greater roles securing strategic sea lanes? On security, how will the military alliances and security arrangement evolve in response to the conflict? Which sectors will government designate as mission critical, and what are the new dependencies and choke points could emerge? In conclusion, I will leave you with three thoughts. The first is that the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, whether partial or total, has impact on different sectors. And then within each sector, there are second and third order implications. Number two, the day after will look different for each sector, as they will take time. Few will take a few weeks to recover, whereas others will take months or even years. Number three, the new normal will look different and will have structural changes to some of the sectors that we've discussed. I'm Rami Rafih. Thank you for listening to Resilience Reflections.